lot of people keep bringing up Clyburn because people want to talk about Joe Biden and they want to talk about how Black people have been moved emotionally, Latinos as well, and the pimping of people of color. Whereas for me, because I started in the game voting for policies, I registered independent when I started voting because I realized that I was not going to be a fan of a politician. And I wanted to vote for the policies. Now when we have these conversations, because of what's in the White House right now is so toxic and so bad, we now can't even utilize that on our side to say we still got to hold Joe Biden accountable, and we still have to make sure that the policies benefit us, because there are a lot of people right now who feel that Joe Biden is not going to really make that big of a difference, other than he's not going to be outwardly crude, rude, abrupt, and dumb. So how do we deal with making sure that people feel that they are being honored for their votes, even if Donald Trump is not the choice? How do we hold Joe Biden accountable to people of color who is in the moment of where we've seen Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, and so on and so forth, talking about investing even further into the police department and doubling down on this crime bill?
So I think there's something else going on. I do think what we need is intergenerational solidarity, and there is this big conundrum that we are in is because of this young and old conflict, right? Because I do think that I have to believe that we are on the right trajectory, but we're running into these obstacles. All the people say that, well, why should you have free college? I had to pay for my own, right? And so we need that solidarity, that's intergenerational, on top of the interracial. We need that. We need it to go both ways, obviously, for various reasons. But what we've been seeing is that, the generation that still holds power of money, social capital, political capital, and has benefited from the kind of policies that we've seen over the last 40, 50 years, is not quite as willing to recognize that the next generation should have that power, and we are asserting the power, right? And despite these challenges, and so I think that's a big piece of the puzzle that I wish from the older generation to say, no, you guys, we're going to vote for you because you understand climate change better than we can understand, because our lifespan is a different point.
Well, I think that, and I'm going to speak from the lens of the Black community. One of the things that we say on a regular basis is that Blackness isn't a monolith, right? And and that is an absolutely true statement. So one of the things that I hate that people do, that we assume, is that Black people all have the same kind of voting record, the same agenda for the Black community, and I bring this up in relation to the mentioning of Clyburn, because one of the things that I saw was that South Carolina chose Joe Biden, right, and that is something that happened, and it's inherently rooted in white supremacy, that people said that because South Carolina Black people chose Joe Biden, that means that Black people chose Joe Biden nationally, and that's just not the case, right? Because at the end of the day, to the point that Eva made, I don't even think that in our community it's just a matter of age. It's also a matter of the haves and have-nots, right? Like, I sit in a place of immense privilege, and thus a lot of the tables I sit at are with other Black people who have immense privilege. And I'm typically the only person who's a progressive and the person who's radical about certain things, because other Black people are just oftentimes happy to have something. We're so conditioned at times in our comfortability, if you would, once we do get access, that we want to keep it that way, right? Like, getting a Joe Biden was the only agenda that some Black people had from a financial standpoint, right? Because they wanted to keep the benefits and the comfortability that they had. So again, I think that in our community, there's layers to why people are voting differently.
Brooke?
I was like itching to jump in on that, because I agree. I think that there are layers within our community. And I think that while we also understand that we're not a monolith, the fact that we're not a monolith should make it important for us to include all aspects of the conversation. And I didn't see that happening. I do totally agree with what you're saying as far as like what happened in South Carolina doesn't necessarily mean every single one of us, but it was such a massive, powerful statement that all of those people should have been included in the conversation a year before that. And they weren't as strongly. It's just kind of like when Representative John Lewis came out and endorsed, I think it was Biden at the time. And I just saw so many people who I thought that were as progressive as me, like calling him stupid and a coward and saying that he didn't care about us. And I'm like, okay, wait a minute. I'm not cool with this, because what I know of Representative Lewis is what I look at as progressivism. What he's fought for his entire life helped us progress to where we are now, as far as Black people in America. And so, although that may not have been what I agreed with, my first thought is to try to understand where he's coming from. And I wish that there was more like, yes, we should be critical. And yes, we are allowed to disagree with our elders, but shouldn't we desire to bring them into the conversation and just try to find some understanding where you can still end up disagreeing? But
do you think,
I just think,
I was gonna say, do you think the push, what happened in South Carolina, was more because it was more of solidarity in the spirit of we don't want more Donald Trump than it was we love Joe Biden?
I was go ahead.
I think that the super progressive movements weren't as inclusive as and I think this is somebody who wasn't necessarily on that team. I think just like someone who considers herself progressive, didn't feel like the movement was as inclusive at all. So as I think people would, it just, there was too much for me of shut up, we're trying to help you. And if you don't already see yourself on this side, how could you, if that's a lot of the energy you're getting, if you're a more conservative Black American? You know what I mean? I think it was just not as inclusive as it should have been, and I think we should learn from this. And what I struggle with now is that I don't see us learning from that. It's like they'll all die soon. That seems to be like what the argument is. Oh, they'll all die soon because the kids thought this, and that's not. I don't know. That's not the world I want to live in.
So I was gonna. Oh, sorry. I think what Brooke is saying is absolutely correct. I think there's numerous things that were true, right? I was on the ground in South Carolina for weeks at a time for Warren and things like that, and I think I did see some of that for sure. And I've had that same criticism of the progressive movement as a whole, and every movement, is not inclusive of Black people. But I've had that same criticism. But I also think the other thing that we have to realize, and this is actually an age thing, and also a wealth thing, and also just a history thing, is the goalposts are going to always be different, right? Like in South Carolina, what I was told oftentimes was, we're just trying not to get lynched. We're just trying not to have Confederate flags all over the place. If we can get to that, where I can go down the street without worrying that somebody's going to be emboldened to attack me, I'm fine. I don't need healthcare. I don't need these other things. That's what people were telling me. Don't need it. Can you just give us Biden? Because we know, white people love Biden. White people, and that's another thing actually. Black people are oftentimes scared of what they think white people will allow us to have, right? White people won't give us Bernie. White people won't give us Elizabeth Warren. Therefore, let's just rock with whoever white people are willing to give us.